So hello and welcome to the Expat Pod. My name is James, your host, and today I'm joined by Delicia. And Delicia, you're from California or from America, and you grew up in the States but lived in Switzerland for a little while. So if you want to give us a quick introduction of yourself.
I'm Delicia, and my last name's Miami, like Miami, but with an N. Yeah, I was born and raised in California. I am a California girl at heart, and I love California, and I'm an author. I'm writing a series of books called Resilient AF. The first book, Kissing Asphalt, is out. And as I was telling you, James, that thank you for having me on, by the way. As I was telling you, that the first part of my life was kind of interesting because when I was 4, I was kidnapped and taken to Baghdad for almost a full year, 11 and a half months. And my mom finally got us back on my 5th birthday. But when I came home, I spoke nothing but Arabic, spoke, read, and wrote Arabic. And it was amazing to me how quickly the English came back to me, which I was grateful for when I got home. But I also, when I was in my 20s, when I was 23, I took a trip around Europe and ended up falling in love with Switzerland. Ended up staying there for about 8 months until I ran out of money and came back home to California, saved my money with the entire goal of going back to Switzerland to live, and packed my records and my cat and moved back to Switzerland. So yeah, and I stayed as long as I could.
Wonderful. What a great introduction. I'm sure we'll unpack that the rest of the podcast. Hello and welcome to section 1 of the podcast about getting there. So Delicia, this is kind of the kind of prelude to your traveling. It's all the things you needed to do before you moved. So maybe with the kind of summer you did, the kind of traveling abroad, the 8 months you did before you tried to move, was there anything you needed to do that? Was there anything you needed to kind of sort out before going to Europe for that long?
Well, and I honestly, I didn't know that I was going to move there. The first time I went, I was just traveling to Europe, and it was my first time traveling to Europe, and I had a full itinerary. And I talk about this in my second book, Not My Circus, that should be coming out actually by the time your podcast is out. So yeah, I had a full itinerary and I had every intention on keeping that full itinerary, but I ended up in Spain and then I went to Geneva, which was a nice welcome. But as far as like preparing for the trip and everything, since I had a full itinerary, it took me all the way through Europe, including Greece. I basically just prepped as if I was going on a very long vacation, and I bought an open-ended ticket, and I don't know if they still have those, but this was 30 years ago. So I found an open-ended ticket that flew into London and out of London, and it was $350 round trip.
Oh, wow.
So it was, way back when, but I jumped on it because I figured it was open-ended, and that way, if something were to happen and things were to change, I was in my 20s, so I didn't have a job. I didn't have a home to come back to. I had my cat who was at my best friend's house, but other than that, it was my first time ever out of the country, outside of Iraq, obviously, but it was my first time out of the country, and the first time I got to go to Europe after hearing my friends. I went to a pretty affluent high school, and I had a lot of wealthier friends, and a lot of them would take trips to Europe, and I'd watch them go, and ask them about how it was, never thinking that I would be able to go, because when I moved out, I had to start college and paid for my own way. My mom was a teacher. She didn't have the money to just send me to Europe, but it wasn't until 2 of my cars got stolen in a very short period of time that my mom decided to save money for me, and she actually was the reason why I was able to go. So as soon as I knew I had X amount of money, then I started to plan my trip, and I used Rick Steves' Europe Through the Back Door because I really wanted to see alternative places to go, just the tourist traps. I wanted to go see those as well, obviously, the Eiffel Tower and all that stuff, but I wanted to go to the backcountry to really see how people lived in the countries that I went to. I wasn't really that interested in seeing the tourist traps, you know. I really just wanted to get immersed in the culture, if you will. And that was really hard to do in the youth hostels.
Yeah, loads of parties probably in youth hostels, I guess. And
yeah.
Did you speak much French, Spanish, German, Italian before you went, or did you tried? Obviously English you'd be fine with.
Just English only. And American English, as you British people call it. I've learned that in Europe. I learned that quick, you know. It was like, you don't speak English, you speak American. And I was like, what are you talking about? But that was the first time I had ever heard that in my life. And I'm like, these people are nuts. Like,
to be fair, when I moved abroad, everyone spoke American English because, you know, TV, film, songs are all American English. So, you know, if you're a Brit going abroad, you have to be the ambassador for the British language. Things like aluminium, not aluminum, and
schedule, not schedule.
Exactly.
I mean, Canadians too, but like, you know, that I could pick up on a Canadian accent in a hot minute. Like, and people are always like, how do you know? I'm like, it's very easy to tell the Canadian accent, but
it is crazy language. And you know, for the same language we're speaking, there's so many differences, colloquialisms, and even in the same country, like in England, it's a very small island, but you've got so many big cities where they've all got their own different interpretations of language and different uses for different words and different names for things. And America being vastly bigger, I'm sure every state's got its own.
Absolutely, yeah. Even within Northern California and Southern California, you have different dialects and different sayings and things like that, you know? So it's kind of amazing, but
you as a writer must love it because you've got so much, or like a sandbox to play in with language, because it really does help. Before you moved and before you went on your Euro trip, was there anything you were thinking about Europe in terms of like what were your impressions of it, looking as someone that hasn't been before?
So bucket list was Greece for sure. Really wanted to go to Santorini and see the, you know, all the white houses in the hills and stuff like that. Bern, believe it or not, was actually not even on my itinerary, and we'll get into that story when we get into it. But yeah, it wasn't even. I had Geneva on my itinerary and then Zurich. I right over the place I ended up living, which is really interesting. You know, it was interesting how I'm very methodical. I'm a big planner. I plan things out months and months and months in advance. And so I had specific things in mind that I wanted to do. You know, I wanted to go see the Eiffel Tower. I had to go to Amsterdam and go to the coffee shops. That was a must, you know. But way back then, like, weed was very illegal in California. But, you know, that was something that I was like, I had to go see what that was all about. So that was pretty exciting to me. I wanted to go see the theater district in London and ride on a double-decker bus and eat some fish and chips while I was there, which I found very hard to do. I found a lot more Indian street food than fish and chips in London. I was very surprised. It was difficult to find my fish and chips, but I found them. And then I was really excited about seeing Paris, and it was just, you know, and after I read the Europe Through the Back Door stuff, I got more excited about certain things like Salamanca in Spain, and going to these little hidden places that nobody really knew about, like Gimmelwald in Switzerland. You ask anybody in Switzerland, oh yeah, I'm going to Gimmelwald. I guarantee you they'll say there's no Gimmelwald in Switzerland. Because every single Swiss person I've ever asked, like, oh yeah, I just came from Gimmelwald. There's no Gimmelwald in Switzerland. You must mean Grindelwald. And I say no, Gimmelwald. And they say, no, I'm sorry, though, it doesn't exist. And I'd have to pull out my map and show them, and they'd go, Gimmelwald? I've never heard of such a place, you know? And so it was places like that Europe Through the Back Door sent me to, that I felt so privileged to just be able to experience, you know? It was amazing. So I had a lot to look forward to, especially poor kid from North Hollywood, you know, that finally was going to get to go off and see the world. It was a pretty one of the planning for that trip.
So then you fell in love with Switzerland from that trip. So when you got back to the US, then what did you do in order to be able to go back again and try and move there?
Yeah, so the first time I went, I stayed for about 8 months, and it was, I mean, do you want me to talk about how I ended up in Bern, or do you want to wait?
Yeah, no, all about, because did you move to Bern originally when you went back, or?
No, so basically what happened was traveling through Europe, and I was on my itinerary following my path, and I had been to Spain, and I went into Geneva, and I stayed at a pension in Geneva, and then my next stop was Gimmewald, which is a little teeny tiny mountain town in the middle of nowhere. They have one youth hostel, and it runs on the honor system. At the time it was 5 Swiss francs, and you just left your money before you left. And there was no food up there, so you had to bring all your food with you. And there were Canadians and Australians and Americans and, people that were not from Switzerland staying there. And they were all mostly hikers that were there for this incredible, amazing mountain town that I hiked through the most incredible places. I remember hiking, and I write about this in my book, where I hiked behind a waterfall that was literally like coming over me. And it was so incredible. I sat down and had my lunch there, and it was like, I lived in Hawaii when I was 14, which was incredible and beautiful and amazing, but Switzerland was something else, and this was kind of my first like, whoa, into like, wow, this country, beautiful. And so at dinner one night, we were chatting, and one of the guys had asked me, where are you going next? And I said, Zurich. And they said, whoa, that's a big jump from here. Have you ever heard of Bern? And I said, yes, the capital of Switzerland, right? I hadn't planned on going there. And he said, well, I think you should go because it's really cool, and the people are amazing, and I think we'll really like it a lot. And it's not as busy as Zurich. And I said, okay, why not? So it was the first time my itinerary changed on the trip. And as I got into Bern, it was incredible. It was an incredibly beautiful place. And I stayed at the youth hostel, which is right off the Aare River. And it was just so beautiful. I was just in awe. And I went to sleep that night. The next day was Sunday, and I'm not sure if you have the same thing in Sweden or in the UK, but Sunday is a day of rest, and this is not something that exists in America. So think about this being a day of rest, all the restaurants being closed, no food, no grocery stores are even open. It's crazy. Like, you're not even allowed to do your laundry in Switzerland on Sunday. Like, it's really seriously. So I started walking up the hill like a naive American, hoping that I would be able to go find a restaurant that I could eat at. And I ran into this little old lady who was walking down the hill. And I said, excuse me, because the hill was very steep and I was tired and hungry. I'd eaten all my food at Gimmewald. And I said, excuse me, do you speak English? And she said, yes, a little bit. And I said, if I walk up this hill, can I get some food? And she looked at me and she said, food? No, honey, it's Sunday. Okay. She goes, there's nothing open on Sunday. Are you hungry? And I explained the situation. I said, yeah, I'm hungry. I just came from this town. I have no food. And she said, come with me. And I was like, okay. From LA, I'm not really that trusting of people. So she's 80-year-old lady. And I'm like, okay, whatever. I had just had some experiences in Spain that had kind of opened my eyes to being a little more trusting of people. I was like, okay. So she took me home, and she turned out to speak a little bit more than just a little bit of English. We ended up having conversations, and she fed me a whole meal. And I was telling her, I love staying at youth hostels. I love traveling, but I don't really get to meet the people that I want to meet. I'm in Switzerland. I want to meet Swiss people. I don't want to meet Canadian or Australians and Americans. And she was like, I'll be right back. But she came back and said, I just called my granddaughter. She's married to an American man. She's going to come pick you up, and you're going to go have dinner with a real Swiss family. And I was like, what? And she goes, but you just ate, but that's okay. You can eat again. And I was like, what? And so they took me to their house and fed me, and they told me about this place called the Kleine Chance that I should go hang out at. And I stayed the next day. I went to the Kleine Chance. These guys from Ghana drove by on their bikes and said hello. And I said hi, and they sat down and started talking to me, and they were refugees. At the time, it was a really big, they had like 25% refugees from Ghana. And they ended up taking me to their house, which was in the slums of Bern, and feeding me African fufu. And it was like an experience I had never had. And then we went up and met a whole bunch of other people. They took me to this place called the Grosse Chance, which is right in front of the university. And I met a whole bunch of people there, and I just kept meeting people. And every night that I would meet somebody, they would say, "Where are you staying?" And I'd say, "The youth hostel." And they'd say, "No, no, no, no. You come home with me." And I'm like, "What?" And they would feed me. And I mean, it was the most incredible experience I had ever had in my life. I ended up meeting this guy named Danu. And I'm still friends with a lot of these people today, 30 years later. And I met a guy named Danu, and he allowed me to stay in his apartment with him. And, I cooked meals for him, and he was stoked about that. And I just hung out. And my friend Ollie, who's still my friend today, he worked at this place called the Right Tower, which unbeknownst to me, was this anarchist place that we would go to, and we would go get meals for 5 francs, like a full good meal for 5 francs. And then we'd go up, they had a little tea shop that Ollie worked at, and we'd go and have tea and sit around and play games. And it was just the most incredible time. And I met so many people. I remember my friend Nadine, who I'm also still friends with. She had told me before I left, "You have so many friends." And I'm like, "Yeah, but you have a lot of friends too." And she goes, "Yeah, but look, I know these people." And she pointed to her little thing, and she goes, "But these people and those people and those people and those." And I was like thinking to myself, I mean, if you read my books, you'll see like I was the bullied kid. I was the kid who was sexually molested. I was the kid who was abused. It's all about overcoming trauma in my books. And so this experience for me was earth shattering. I can't even tell you. To be like the popular kid, to be the kid that was liked, not only loved, but liked. That's not something I've really experienced in my lifetime by many people. And so when I felt that, it was when I decided to leave and go continue my itinerary, I thought, like, are you crazy? What are you doing? But I did. I continued my itinerary. I went all the way to Greece, and I couldn't stop thinking about Switzerland. And I ended up changing my path and flying back to Bern and surprising everyone. And I stayed there basically until I ran out of money. The way that I got back to London to fly home on my open-ended ticket was, I don't know how I got this idea. I'm a crazy girl, but I decided to make necklaces. And so I went to the craft store and I bought all these random things to make necklaces and leather chains and all this stuff. And I started making necklaces, and I went to the Grosse Chance, and I learned how to say, well, by that time I could speak a little bit of Swiss German. And I learned how to say I'm selling necklaces in Swiss German, and they were like a hot commodity. Everybody was buying my necklaces. I made enough in a couple weeks to go back to take the flight home. So yeah, and that's how I ended up in Bern. And kind of crazy story, but it was one of the highlights of my life for sure. And like I said, I'm still friends with a lot of these people, and they're really Ollie and I talk often. So, I watch, he's a grandpa now, so I've seen his kids and his kids' kids, so it's really fun.
That's amazing. So then you went home, and I guess you couldn't stop thinking about Bern when you got there. So you then wanted to try and move back, right?
Yeah, that was the whole goal, 100%. That's all I wanted to do. And I was focused on that 1,000%. I ended up moving in with my very perverted brother that I didn't realize at the time, but I ended up moving in with him in San Francisco and working for him. And then also worked 3 different waitress jobs at night so that I could make tips. And that allowed me to practice my German, because a lot of German people, tourists in San Francisco. So it was very helpful to me to do that. And then as soon as I saved my money is when I packed up my records and my cat. And Danu, amazing guy that he is, he let me stay with him again in his apartment. And this time, obviously, with my cat. So it was a little more permanent. And yeah, so then I started looking for jobs. And that's when I figured out that the Swiss people love you as a tourist, but when you go to try and live there, it's not easy even a little bit. At least not 30 years ago it wasn't. And it was things like you can't work unless you have a Bewilligung, which is a permit. You can't get a Bewilligung unless you have worked in Switzerland for 10 years. Or have had an apartment and lived there and been self-sufficient for 10 years. So I'm like, how? That makes it virtually impossible to do. So I ended up having to find a job under the table. And I found a job working on a farm. And I was taking care of 6 horses and 5 dogs. And it came with my own little scooter. And I got my own little apartment right next to the barns, which was really, really cool. The lady I worked for was a German lady who was married to a Swiss man twice her age. She was kind of the epitome of what German people are portrayed in movies and stuff like that, as very staunch and, and she was very much like that. But like all the German people I've ever encountered aren't like that at all. So it was really weird to actually run into a German person that was like those types that they portrayed in the movies, because I'm like, everyone I had ever met had been super cool and just normal like me, but this lady was very, very staunch and very, very authoritarian and very, she treated me like I was a refugee. To the point where I had to tell her, look, lady, I'm American. I can go back to the States anytime I want to. I'm not a refugee, and even if I was, you shouldn't be treating anybody like that, I mean, she just was very demeaning. And it was really hard because it was there that the homesickness hit me. And it was there that what I learned later was Crohn's disease that started. And so it was really a tough time. Once I got that job, it was kind of all downhill from there. I mean, I enjoyed it. I had fun. I didn't get to see my friends as often as I wanted to anymore. I couldn't just go hang out with them. It was it was different when you start working versus just hanging out. And the work was difficult. It was difficult to take that kind of pressure and attitude.
To be in that environment and then having the energy to go out in the evening is harder because you're so exhausted from working in a foreign language or working in that environment, and just especially on a field or on a farm, it's a lot of manual work and a lot of hard work, either in the heat or in the altitude. If it's quite high up in the Alps, it's probably quite exhausting in that sense as well.
So, yeah, the other thing I was going to say is, I got sick there, and it wasn't until, and I write about this starting in the second book, Not My Circus, but also to the third book, The Queen of Silver Linings, which is the third and final book in the series. And that book talks about my healing journey and all the things that I've learned and kind of why I have Crohn's to begin with, is I think partly started in Baghdad when I held everything in my solar plexus and I was petrified the entire time I was there. And I learned about that when I did breath work in Sedona. So the third kind of goes into that kind of stuff and ties everything together. And in Switzerland, when I got sick, what I didn't realize is that when I came home, about 20 years after I got back, maybe 15, I went to an allergist and got tested for allergies. And my biggest allergies are barley and hops, like top up top. And I didn't realize that all of the hay in Switzerland is made from barley. And so there were times when I would bale the hay, and the worst part I think for me was in the snow when I was cleaning the hay and I would have to stomp on the pile to truss it down with my boot, and it was snowing. The heat would get to it. And so I was actually inhaling vapors from the barley into my body while I was working there. So I think, unbeknownst to me, that my body had like a really bad inflammatory reaction to that. And then in addition to that, I'm somebody who's very independent. And like when I was moving, my mom begged me not to go, begged me. And I was like, bye, Mom. I'm living my life. I'm having fun, And when the homesickness hit me, never expected anything like that. Like it hit me hard and fast. And it was like the most depressed I think I've ever been in my life. And it was just like every day I literally felt my heart cracking. Like I felt the physical pain of it from missing my mom, from missing my dad, from missing my brother of all people, Like, I mean, you never think things like that. My friends, like just missing macaroni and cheese and American pizza and Mexican food. You can't get Mexican food in Switzerland. Sorry, maybe you can now, but 30 years ago, they didn't know what Mexican food was. They tried, but good luck, like, so I mean, it was coming from California, we get Mexican food, so I mean, it's just like little things like that you never think you miss that just tug at your heartstrings every single day, I'm sure you probably have the same thing. You probably miss bangers and mash.
I don't really eat them very often, to be fair. I miss mostly like confectionery stuff and cheap beer, because in Sweden, like alcohol is highly controlled because it's all sold by one company and it's very expensive. So like a pint of beer is like £10, whereas it's half the price in the UK. So I missed that. More for the social side of it, just for drinking beer. But they had very good beer in Sweden because it's expensive, so they make it good. And I miss daylight, which is unusual because England still goes quite dark, but it's enough difference that it's difficult. And it's like random things like some certain foods I'd eat, which maybe wouldn't even be typically British, but it would just be something I'd have quite a lot because England's Britain's such a great multicultural nation. We have influence from all over. As you mentioned, lots of Indian street food in the UK. We have amazing Indian restaurants in the UK because we've got a lot of great Indian communities in the UK, and we've got a wonderful kind of cross section of a lot of all stems from the old empire, which has got its checkered past, but it's meant that coming to the island of Great Britain, there's a lot of great people from all over the world because the Windrush generation brought all this incredible culture from like the Caribbean and West Indies and all those amazing places. So you have all this great food in that sense as well, which you kind of miss that. You miss just people being out, going to a pub or a bar or a restaurant in the evening, which didn't really happen in Sweden. People just kind of stuck to their own kind of thing, which was a little hard for me because I didn't know anyone, or when you were a handful of people, like I couldn't keep asking them to hang out with me because they had their own lives to deal with or families or whatever. So as in the UK, you could just walk to a pub and you'd be by yourself and you'll start talking to about 5 different people and maybe make some new friends from it. Didn't really happen that much in Sweden unless it was in the summer or like random nights when it's AM or something. But you've got work the next day, you can't just go and do that.
Yeah, that's a big cultural change for sure.
Massively. And, even though it's still, quite European countries, there's still a lot of similarities. It's those small things which, make your day and make you kind of deal with the things you want, like your mac and cheese or, just little things like that, which, you think, it's not a big thing. But then when you are speaking another language, there's so many things that are different. It's the kind of accumulation of all those small things which make you like just seek something that's familiar. So I'd listen to a lot of like BBC radio, or I'd watch British TV shows. Would help me a lot as well when I was feeling a bit homesick because we do comedy very well. So
You do indeed. You do indeed. My brother used to always subject me to watch Benny Hill when I was a kid, and I hated it.
yeah, well, we had The Office first.
Yeah, wasn't Benny Hill was way before that, though.
Yeah, completely. It's Killstone Cops or something, wasn't it?
And my brother loved it. It was like, I just wanted to watch Happy Days.
I haven't ever watched Happy Days, actually. I've not subjected myself to watching that yet. So.
Well, that's what's great about streaming nowadays, right? You have the opportunity to do all that. And I mean, I have to say, like, sometimes I really don't like technology, but the one thing I can say that's fantastic about technology is I was able to get back in touch with all my Swiss friends, and people that I've met around the globe that I normally wouldn't be able to reach out to. I mean, WhatsApp is amazing, and all video chat, and he sends me videos of his granddaughter singing, and it's just like, I feel like I'm part of their life now. And before, like, even when I went there, in the 90s, because I went in 93, it just, yeah, it's not that, it's totally different than it was. And I think in one way, technology is great, and another way, it kind of eliminates that whole, like you were saying, walking down the street and you meet a bunch of people. Like, that doesn't really happen because now you walk down the street, everyone's on their phones.
Yeah, I think in bigger cities, it's definitely like that for sure. I think small towns still have a bit of that community vibe, which is quite nice. Or certain neighborhoods in big cities might do, but yeah, it's still a lot rarer because your attention is being, I guess, bidded for in so many different ways now. You've got so much media on your phone or music or, things which can isolate you or keep you in your own world. Like listen to podcasts, that kind of stuff, which you didn't really have, right? So I remember growing up and I had a Game Boy without a backlight, and I was like, oh, the backlight was the best thing ever because I could play it in the car in the nighttime without annoying my parents or looking for a streetlight to read a book or something,
Like, I wonder if I go back to the Grosse Chance, if there'd be people hanging out like there was before or not. You know what I mean? Like, I probably wouldn't have had the opportunity to have the experiences that I had in Switzerland had technology been a thing, because I wouldn't have met as all the amazing, beautiful people that I met. I wouldn't have probably met. Their face would have been in their phone. And I would have wandered around by myself, It would have been a completely different experience. And I think about that kind of stuff now, and like, technology is great, but like, what are we missing at the same time?
I think the spontaneity's gone. You might still get the connection because you'll be seeking it still, if you're traveling like yourself, but people who are local might not be looking for it because they need it. But, there's apps like Meetup and things, which I used quite a lot in Sweden, which you could find a local writing club or a language cafe, or you could find a disc golf. People go play disc golf or go for hiking or go to the pub. But usually there were other people who are also traveling, or they're expats. In my case, that's what it was. People who weren't from the country because they were also in a similar situation where they were lonely and bored. So if you got enough lonely and bored people, they all go to a pub. That's basically what happened. But you wouldn't have the spontaneity as you're describing with local people as much, especially if you're not working in an office or in an environment where you're just immersed in society. It's quite difficult.
Yeah,
completely.
It's very, very different. I miss those times, Sometimes I reminisce. I wish I could hit the rewind button.
Go for a national purge of technology or something.
Yeah, right?
Just one week a year,
Although at the same time, I love my MetaQuest, and I love being able to play, games with my nephew who's, he's like 45 miles away from me, but it feels like we're in the same room. I mean, it's cool, and it's give and take, right? Plus and minus with everything in the world.
I guess looking back at your time then, if you could tell yourself something before you moved, which would have enhanced your experience, what would you have told yourself? What might you have warned your younger self?
I would say have more patience, and I would jump in 2 feet forward. Don't be so hasty to get back there, because if I would have gone about things the right way, which I'm not even really sure what those are still, but I mean, if I would have done the research and said, okay, let me see if I can get some, I know that Switzerland's really good about giving student visas now, so maybe I could have gone there and gotten into the University of Bern, and I would have been on a different trajectory. They teach classes in English there. So I learned about that when I was long after I had been there. Actually, I learned about it before Trump became president the first time because I was thinking about moving out of the country. And so I started looking at my options, and I was thinking Mexico, or I was thinking Switzerland. And Switzerland, I found out that, they teach classes in English, that you can get a student fairly easily. And that's probably the direction I would have gone instead of trying to just go willy-nilly and stay with a friend on his couch and then get a job at a farm. And I probably would have done things the right way, and that I definitely would have changed things. And I did actually. Two of my friends, Padu and Oli, actually offered to marry me so that I could stay there, which was really sweet. But it wasn't like right for anyone to do that. So yeah, I think I would have done more research, and I would have done it the right way. And I would have gone in on a student visa, I think. Because I didn't actually start my education, my college education. I did my undergraduate at community college, putting myself through community college. But it wasn't until after I came back that I moved to Santa Cruz and went to UCSC. So I could have actually started my college in Switzerland, and how cool would have that been? But I didn't really have an advisor or anybody giving me advice. It was all whatever I could come up with in my own head at the time, and I was only in my 20s, so.
Well, now hopefully people watching this or listening to this are getting your advice and taking it on, so you're passing it forward, so to speak, and hopefully inspiring people to go enjoy Bern.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Switzerland, and it's funny you live in Sweden, because if you ask, I would say 9 out of 10 people in America, and they say, "Oh, where did you live?" I'd say I lived in Switzerland. And they say, "Oh, how was it living in Sweden?" And it's like, no, dummy. Switzerland is like this big, Sweden is like that big, and it's way up here in the map. It's like people don't even know where it's at, but it's the most amazing, beautiful country. And the people are just incredible. And they're just like, they changed my life. The people of Switzerland changed my life.
Well, there's quite a lot of similarities, I suppose. They both don't use the euro. They both get a lot of snow, a lot of beautiful landscapes. But yeah, just the size is much different, and I'm pretty sure the daytime hours are much different. But Switzerland is beautiful. I do enjoy it there as well. It's a very populous place to go skiing, though, if you're European.
Yeah, it's a lovely country. I mean, and it's just, for me, it's the people. And it's even like my favorite place on the planet is Mexico. And it's because of people, and it's because I'm humbled every time I go there. And the people in Mexico are just happy, and they have nothing, and they're happy. And to me, that's, I embrace that, because they live their life not through wealth, but through love.
So there's a different way of measuring wealth. It's not monetary. It's like friendships or experiences. Wealth is a paradigm you view it through, and if you can not see it by how much you've accumulated in terms of a number in your bank balance, but a number in your friendship list, or number of phone calls you have, or experiences you've had. And you said, or you talk with so much passion and so much emotion about your time when you were traveling through Switzerland, which is beautiful to witness for me, because I could see it in the way you were saying about it, and you just showed that moment really touched you and really left a mark on your life, which, if you have those moments in your life, you're also lucky for those summers or those years or whatever, just to have these amazing people, and you're now very lucky to still be friends with them, which is amazing to hear, and just shows how much of an impression you left on their lives, if they're still, want to be your friends. Even after what time, you could just be the American who came to Europe for the summer, like a lot of Europeans think. But no, it's not true.
Not for all of us anyway. I mean, there are some of us, and trust me, I witnessed some of them while I was over there in Europe, and it was embarrassing for me as an American to see the way and the attitude that some of them had, and it was just like, whoa, could I get a Canada sticker for my backpack, please? But yeah, because I mean, that's not all of us, you know what I mean? I guess it's like anything. You lump one characteristic of one person that you see into everybody. But I guess now with the whole Trump era, now we have a name for them and they're called Karens. So yeah, but yeah, it's kind of interesting to see how things evolved. But like even back then it was, I'm always somebody who has the utmost respect for any place I travel. I want to learn their language. I want to learn their customs. And that's what it's all about. I mean, why travel somewhere and just be demanding and think that you know what it's about when no, in Europe, it's customary to dine for, hours on end. It's not like a hurry up and stuff your face and get out of here kind of thing. Like that's not culture. And why not immerse yourself in that culture instead of trying to pull the culture that you're from to whatever country you go to? You know what I mean? Like, yeah, it was an interesting, eye-opening experience. And like you had said before at some point in this conversation, it's all about learning. And I had done a lot of school before I traveled, and I'll tell every single person, and I try and tell every child, every kid that I run into, like traveling abroad specifically, traveling within the U.S. is amazing. And we have so many different states and so many different things to see. And there's just amazing things, but traveling abroad, you get a completely different sense of the world you do not see in America, that you absolutely don't see on American television or on the news, unless you go out and watch CNN and listen to PBS and you're out there listening to, all of the stations that look both ways. But it's interesting because like I've been places like Cambodia and I walked through the killing fields. To do something like that versus reading it in your history books, if you even do here in America anymore, which you don't probably. But to learn about Pol Pot, to learn about what happened in Cambodia, how many people, 3 million out of 5 million people of their country were killed. And we didn't hear about it in America. This happened when I was a kid in the 70s. And I remember hearing about the American who was lost at sea, who got taken by Cambodian soldiers. But that's all I ever heard of it, until I went to work for the company that I work for now. And I met a woman who works there who's from Cambodia. And she, at 17 years old, her whole entire family was killed in front of her face, and she escaped. She escaped to Thailand, and then she escaped to America, and she never looked back. But, it's mind-boggling to me to actually stand in the place where it happened versus in the history books. To me, it's just so much more powerful, and I got so much more out of it. And in addition to that, you get to see the Cambodian people and the fact that this happened to their grandparents, but they're still smiling. They have nothing and they're still smiling. It's mind-boggling. I felt safer in Cambodia than I ever have in the States. Mind-boggling to me. And then the people who stay in the States and don't get to see that, it just is heartbreaking to me. And honestly, I could say the same thing about Europeans coming to America. I've talked to so many Europeans who don't want to go to America, who have no desire to come to America. America's beautiful, and it's not all dangerous, Of course there are places that are dangerous, just like there are places in Paris that are dangerous, in London that are dangerous, you know what I mean? There's dangerous places everywhere, but I live on the top of a mountain in the Santa Cruz Mountains where I could see, the ocean as it's snowing on my property. There's things you can't get anywhere else in the world, I'm just talking California. The wineries of Napa, the Yosemite, like you said, there's the deserts here. There's just amazing things. Yeah, and New York City, holy crap, how could you go your whole life and not want to see New York City? It's amazing, it's just to be there. And I cried the first time I was there because I was like, I'm standing on the corner of Miracle on 34th Street, and it was wow. And it was Christmas time. And everybody was there in the carriage rides, and it was just like, it was glorious. And like, I've tried so hard to get my friends from Switzerland to come visit me, and nobody wants to. Ollie wants to, but he can't get his family to want to. But like, yeah, nobody wants to come, and it's like, it's so beautiful. I want to show people where I'm from as much as I want to see other people's culture.
Thank you for your time. It's been really, really eye-opening for sure to listen to your story, and it's obviously been from a place of, you know, great darkness at times, but you seem to have a lot of love and light in your heart now, which is great to see that you've managed to heal. And you know, the way you talk about your friends in Switzerland when you first went really does kind of show through how much they left an imprint on your life and on your soul, which probably then made your future much brighter than you could have imagined before you went. So that's the beauty of living abroad or experiencing life abroad. And thank you for sharing that story with me, and hopefully with everyone listening, and hope that's inspired people to go and follow in your footsteps and you know, just travel and make their own friends and have their own stories. They were talking about their grandkids with their friends when they're older as well. You know, it's that kind of beautiful thing. So thank you. And I don't know if you wanted to say where people can buy your books and find a bit more about them.
Sure, absolutely. And thank you for the opportunity to talk about this, because I haven't been afforded the opportunity to talk about my times in Switzerland, and it's honestly one of the fondest times of my life. So I was really excited about this and coming on and being able to talk about Switzerland and just my amazing people over there. So, but you can find my books on Amazon right now. Kissing Asphalt is the name of it, and my website is www.kissingasphalt.com, ASPHALT. And you can also find me on Instagram, Delicia Naomi Author, and on Facebook as well under Kissing Asphalt. And eventually I'm going to be doing the Resilient AF podcast. Once my house is built and I have a space where I can do it, yeah, I'm excited about that as well. So
incredible. Well, as always, the links will be below in the show notes. So if you are interested, please do go check it out. And it should be out now, the second book, and possibly the third book. So if they are, they'll all be in the links below. I'll have to update it when the third one comes out. But as always, thank you for watching, listening, and, you know, enjoying the story. And if you have found something inspiring, or you have found something you want to come up, please let us know in the comments. Please do get in touch. Please share with your friends and family and anyone else you might know who wants to live abroad or would really find this conversation very meaningful to them. As always, we'll see you next time for the Expat Pod.